Hey, it's Stephanie. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode on my podcast. And I'm super excited to have Erica DeAnda here. She's the head brewer at Tumbled Rock Brewery here in Baraboo, which is one of the most fun places to hang out and drink beer, especially on a nice, warm summer day. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So just to give the listeners a little bit of backstory, I reached out to Erica a few years ago when I had first learned about her. I saw her in a magazine somewhere. And I was just like, I'm just going to ask her to have coffee. And she's probably going to say no because she's super cool. And I wrestled with it for a little while. And then I finally asked you to have coffee. And we did.
Mm-hmm.
And we have like a lot in common. We care a lot about other people, probably for a while more so than ourselves.
100%.
But we're working through,
Yes.
we're working through our own mental health journeys of not people pleasing. And
Mm-hmm.
so why don't you just give us a little introduction and how did you end up in Wisconsin, and just start talking and I'll ask questions.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. And I have been in Wisconsin for about 6-7 years now. I am originally from Oakland, California. I have been in the beer industry for 10 of those years. I started as a server, a cocktail server, and moved my way through a brew pub server. And then I went from brew pub serving to managing a tap room to slinging kegs in the back of a big commercial brewery. And from there, I started assistant brewing. And then I went to assistant brewing a small cask ale brewery in Redwood City, where I was working under an amazing woman, Alicia Blue. And at the time, I was kind of, my now husband, then boyfriend, we were kind of like, we need to get out of California. It's a little bit too expensive. And we just needed kind of a new life, a new start. And I started applying for jobs just anywhere. And a brewery here in Wisconsin picked me up. We packed all of our stuff, our 2 cats, into our little Honda Civic, mailed a bunch of boxes out here. And I moved to a small town out here from Oakland. And it was a little bit of a culture shock, to say the least. We lasted out there about 3 months before we made the jump to Madison, where we were a little bit of a better fit. Worked at Octopi for about a year, where I met some incredible people, made some really good connections, had an amazing time. And from there, I met Michelle Kohler and Randy Scott, who are opening Tumbled Rock here in Baraboo. I really love small batch brewing. And Octopi was an amazing place, but it was just a huge commercial brewery. And I was just like, wanted to get my hands back into kind of doing everything. And that's kind of what they were offering me, was community. I would be doing everything from writing the recipes, kegging the beer, cellaring the beer, brewing the beer. And again, the community aspect was what really drove me to their brewery. And then they hired me, and I helped them open Tumbled Rock, and here we are 5 years later. And now I'm a Baraboo native, bought a house here 2 years ago, and I'm not leaving until they kick me out.
Yeah, and didn't you move to, where did you move first? It was up north. Minocqua. Yeah, so that's like a whole nother, maybe not to you at the moment, but that's like another level of up north.
Yeah, that was a big culture shock. We rented a house sight unseen, which was amazing. I mean, we went from a small studio apartment that we were renting for like $15.25 with a parking space that wasn't included in the price, and we had to go, do our laundry in like a cellar basement in the apartment in Oakland, and take a train everywhere, to living in the middle of kind of nowhere with lakes everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And the community in Minocqua was amazing and incredible, but it was just, I think, a little bit too out there for us, where Madison was just a little bit more, it was still had that like small town feel, but like had still that like big city kind of atmosphere at the same time. So We were in Minocqua from like August to April.
Oh, so you made it through a winter.
Yeah, my first winter. So I did the winter. It was a little rough, but I did
Yeah.
it.
I feel bad for the cats.
Yeah, they were fine. They had
Okay.
blankets. They did, they didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
I think the drive was a little bit rough for them, but once they got settled in and they had so many windows where in Oakland, they only had 2 windows to look at it.
Oh, yeah.
So in Minocqua, they had wildlife to look at. And they had more blankets because I was freezing. So they were like, oh, this is sweet. We've got all this stuff to look at now. And now here in Baraboo, they're much more settled in and, they've acclimated.
So what about with your husband now? I mean, there had to have been more than just the money aspect, I'm assuming, to get out of Oakland. And you just picked the first place that said yes. I mean, what was the late night talks about that before you guys actually packed up?
Yeah. So my husband, AJ, he's actually from Ohio. He was born and raised out in a small town in Ohio. So he is from the Midwest and he had kind of moved all around. He went to the Culinary Institute in Florida. He had lived in Atlanta. He had lived in Colorado. He had kind of moved everywhere where I spent all of my time in California. I had never left California. I had traveled a little bit with my family, but I had never experienced living anywhere else. And all my life, I always said I wanted to leave California. But my thing was like, when I was a teenager and when I was a kid, I was kind of like a nerdy figure kid. And I was like, I'm going to go to New York and like do performing arts and all that stuff, even though I was like shy and introverted. But I knew that I didn't want to stay in California. So at that point, he was working as a chef in Oakland and his career had already kind of taken off. Whereas like I was going from cocktail serving to assistant brewing and my career was kind of just starting and he really could go anywhere. He was working for a Michelin-starred chef out in Oakland. He had already had, he had already kind of had his life experiences, if you will, where I hadn't really had a lot of them. So he was very supportive and he's like, I will really go anywhere you want to go. And he's like, you apply for the jobs and I'll kind of just follow suit and apply wherever you want to go. And those were kind of like the talks was just, you lead the charge and I will follow with you and I can get a job anywhere because I already have a lot of great recommendations because I've already worked for a handful of Michelin star chefs. My name is kind of already established. Now let's establish you. So that was kind of where we were at that time.
To be able to take the lead, though.
Yeah, it was scary.
Yeah, exciting and scary.
Yeah. And I applied I was just on like Pro Brewer and Indeed, just kind of like applying to wherever I thought looked cool. I had applied actually at Third Space in Milwaukee and I had taken an interview with them, but the timeline wasn't right with when we needed to move. Because we were kind of looking at bigger cities in the long run. We actually wanted to be in bigger cities.
Okay.
But again, we weren't necessarily like opposed. We were just like, well, let's go from Oakland to Milwaukee or,
Yeah.
places like that, which is ironic that we ended up in
Baraboo.
We
Yeah.
love it here. And, we're only a couple hours away from Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, Minneapolis is like 3 hours. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah. So, and we applied for some in Colorado, but the biggest, I think one of the biggest things for us too was we were looking for a different lifestyle, a better quality of lifestyle. And we just knew that we couldn't be in a bigger city than Oakland. So that was, I think, one of the deciding factors too for us was not going somewhere that was like California.
Yeah. Complete opposite. And then you've stuck it out. So my journey to California has been twice now, and I get out there and I panic and come back. But of course you do have AJ, who is very supportive, that I suppose did you have a point when you panicked and you're like, oh, let's just go back? Or have you guys just been, oh, okay.
Yeah, the drive. We were driving. We were like in like maybe the deserts of like Nevada or something like that. And
Not even far.
not far at all. It was like the second day of our drive. And it didn't help that I had probably taken like some of our like gummies that we were smuggling out of the state.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden I look at AJ and I was like, are we making a mistake? Are we making a mistake? Because I had never been away from my family like this. AJ, you know, he had been doing this his whole life. You know, he left his mom at like 15 with his older brother. You know, they went to LA when he was a minor with his older brother. So he was like, yeah, this is fine. I'm chill. But I was like, oh my God, we're making a huge mistake. Oh God. I was like hyperventilating, like, you know, literally the day after we left California, I was freaking out. And I do still have moments sometimes, but I think it's been great for me. And I do miss my family. I miss my friends that I've left out there. But the beautiful thing is getting to go back and enjoy what I've left behind. You know, one of my favorite sayings was, you can't miss you if I don't leave, you know?
Yeah.
And so it kind of makes you enjoy it more when you do get to go back and see it.
Yeah, you're in the moment versus just the day to day. Yeah. Someday I'm going to leave Baraboo and maybe I'll come back again. But, you know, just to have that opportunity to, I don't know, and it might just be an ego thing, but to prove to myself that I can do it. You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people love Baraboo and a lot of people come here. So I do feel really, I don't want to say like, oh, Baraboo. It's just always just been this thought that I'm going to not be here forever, but I'm 43 years in.
Yeah.
But anything can change.
It really can. Who's to say, you know, maybe next year you go somewhere else and you experience it and you make, like, I don't know. I think that's kind of the beauty too. It's like you can always have like a home base and then go off somewhere else and then come back and then go off somewhere else. You know, I don't think there's necessarily anything wrong with that.
Yeah. My manifesting dreams are now Nashville.
Oh, yeah. Love Nashville.
Yeah. Just the creative scene there. I think would just be so fun. Yeah, difficult, but just the music and the art and the warmer weather. And let's talk about the creative side of your job. And because you come up with all the names of your beer, you come up with all your beer. And first off, the ability that you have, not the ability, what you've created at Tumbled Rock with the beer and the names of the beer, on top of what Tumbled Rock is, which is just an awesome outdoor venue, nothing like it in the area. How does it feel to like just know people are out there enjoying your beer every day and it's packed? And
it still doesn't necessarily feel real. And I am one of those people who has a lot of imposter syndrome, to where I could have, you know, a sea of people. I see all the people out there drinking the beer and enjoying, you know, everything that, you know, we as a team have built out there. And then I hear one person say something negative and I'm like, hang it up. I'm done. I've done a terrible job. I shouldn't not be doing this anymore. And I fight through that every day. But it's incredible. I try to remember to like be proud of myself, but also I am incredibly like humbled as well. I'm always grateful. Grateful is like one of my biggest words that I like to use, because I love seeing people drink my beer. Community is a big thing for me, bringing people together and just enjoying something that like I've poured a lot of myself into. I've dedicated basically, you know, 10 years of my life to this like one beverage, and just getting to see people like enjoy that. And then I'm constantly thinking like, how can I make this better? How can I be better? How can we make, you know, this place be like more great? So it's constantly like my wheels are constantly turning, but it's just, I'm just constantly like in awe that we've created this place. It's insane. It's just like a whirlwind sometimes too, just like seeing people just drinking all this beer, and I just can't get over it sometimes.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to feel surreal.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, it never goes to my head. I never take it for granted. I'm always just in the back of my mind, just like, wow, this is crazy that people are just here enjoying something that I love to do, that I started because I really started it because um, the brewery that I worked at, the dock at Linden Street, Adam, their head brewer, he was one of the greatest people and one of like the biggest inspirations for me. He loved beer so much, and he never bought into like the the a lot of a lot of it is like there's like a novelty part of brewing sometimes where it's like you get to go to like these really like cool like parties or like brewery exclusives where you can drink like the best of the best and all these things. Adam was so down to earth, and he never cared about any of that stuff. He just wanted to drink beer and do good in his community. He was helping build like a local skate park for the kids. He was involved in all kinds of just really great community projects in Oakland. And I would watch him walk around the restaurant with his own beer mug and just drinking his beer that he made, talking to the customers. And that was something where, as I was waiting tables, because I hated waiting tables, I was like, I want that job. How do I get his job? And that was kind of the start of my beer journey, was like, I just want to like walk around and drink beer and talk to people. So like that was kind of part of it, is like, I just want this like I just want to feel like I'm part of something bigger than myself.
Yeah.
And that was how I found it
Yeah.
in beer making.
Do you think you'll always be in beer making?
I hope so, because I don't have a lot of like hobbies or a lot of like passions or interests. Like, like I said, I'm big into like musical theater and Legos, and I don't think there's a big like market for other jobs in that, because I haven't dedicated a lot of my time into those things like I have for beer. So even if I'm not into beer making, in the future, there are still other avenues of beer that maybe are, I could explore. But I think beer will always be my journey and my passion. So whether it's, curating a beer menu for somebody, or working for like a malt company or something like that. But I hope to be at Tumbled Rock for forever.
Let's talk about maybe some of the burnout that can happen within your industry specifically, and widely, the burnout that happens when you're constantly feeling like you have to create. So, I mean, it can be content creators. It can be, there's so many different ways we experience burnout when we're creative people. And so let's talk specifically about burnout in your industry.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's a big topic of conversation right now in the beer industry. And I know across, like you said, all industries right now, everyone is feeling burnt out. Hustle culture is a huge thing, everywhere. And we always have to be, in the beer industry, you always have to be pushing out the latest new product, be the most innovative brewer, using the next top ingredient, the next big thing to market. You're always rushing. And I'm not necessarily doing that, but I do feel burnout creatively sometimes. And even though I work by myself, I feel burnout sometimes because I am still in competition. Even though brewers don't necessarily look at it as we're in competition, we still view it, we don't view it as competition, but it is still a competition, right?
Mm-hmm.
You are still trying to get the next big thing.
You always want to be the best.
Yeah, exactly. And like I said, even though there is 100 people telling you your beer is the best beer they've ever had and it's so good, one person can tell you this was the worst beer they've ever had. That can ruin my whole week. And I'm incredibly hard on myself. I have a very harsh inner critic. And so for me, burnout is something that I struggle with. And because I constantly feel like I have to prove to others, especially being a woman in a male dominated industry. I constantly have to be like proving like I can do this. I'm pushing forward. I'm never stopping, to the point where I'm like, wow, I'm not putting out a good product anymore because I am so tired, because I've burnt myself out completely. And now my product is suffering. I'm suffering. My business is suffering. Everybody is suffering because my brain is suffering. I will say that Tumbled Rock and Michelle and Randy have really given me the grace and the space to not experience burnout. They really accommodate my needs and my mental health and how I am as a human being. And they don't push a typical like 9 to 5, 40-hour week on me. They're like, as long as the beer is flowing, you're good. Like, take care of yourself. They've really been good about giving me the grace that I need, which has been incredibly important. And I wish that other industries would take that, because burnout is not fun for people. And especially when you are suffering with your mental health. And, there's a lot of talk about like people getting diagnosed with like being neurodivergent or things like that, ADHD, being on the spectrum. I'm just getting diagnosed with these things at 34, and finding those things about myself makes a lot more sense why I get burnout more quickly, why I feel the way that I feel half of the time. So really getting to take that space is incredibly important.
When you talk about mental health, you talk about it the same as you talking about creating beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's your purpose, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You're just as passionate about it.
Yeah.
And when we first met, we talked about it then as well. So what's your journey been like the last 4 years since we met? Or I don't know how, it's probably been about maybe 3, maybe 2, who knows? But I know that you've really been taking some great strides in figuring yourself out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's been tough. As a kid, I was in and out of therapy occasionally. And I was, I'm a child of divorce. My parents were a bit young parents. And I grew up separated from my brother. And then my sister came along, and I just had I felt like very different. I never necessarily felt like normal or like other kids. I always felt very introverted. I never liked doing a lot of things that like my peers like to do, things like that. And so now that I'm 34, I always told AJ, my husband, that I was like, I never feel like my mental health is like that bad to where it's getting in the way of my life. Well, in the past few years, I kind of started taking a look at my life, and I was like, I really do feel like it actually is taking a toll. And I do think that I am hindered in the way that I live my life through my mental health. So I sought out a therapist and kind of started talking to her. And then I went to my actual doctor and was like, hey, I think I may have ADHD. I got onto TikTok, which surprisingly, I know a lot of people, TikTok can be kind of polarizing for certain people, but I got onto TikTok just as like a funny little thing to kind of do during the pandemic. Through that, I found a community of women my age who had just started getting diagnosed with ADHD, autism, different things. And I saw myself represented in those women and talking, they were really like holding space for themselves and other women and just talking about their symptoms. And, I was just like really resonating with what these women were saying. And then I started kind of looking at my life as a whole. And I was just like, wow, everything I did as a kid up till now, these weren't just like quirky little things I was doing. They all kind of intertwined. So I went and my doctor recommended me to see a psychiatrist, and I went and got tested for numerous things, where I was tested for like 6 hours, and I was diagnosed with OCD, ADHD, and then currently working on, autism tests, which has also been a little bit scary to talk about. But it makes sense about how I've felt my whole life and how I've never felt normal and how I've always felt like I've been an introvert and how I've always thought I've had social anxiety. And people are always like, but you're so good at talking. But it takes me days to recharge. It takes me, I'm scared of my own mind. There's like all these different things. So I've been working with a really wonderful therapist. I have a really great psychiatrist. I've got an amazing OCD therapist I've been working with for exposure therapy, and then working with like an autism specialist, and just really trying to get my mind in a place to where my life can start working for me so I don't experience burnout.
Mm-hmm.
So I can start living the most authentic way that I can. Yeah, exactly. Because I'm tired of living my life being fearful, feeling like I can't, I take on all of these roles in my life, and I've learned that I don't even know who I really am because I mirror so many different people and I've lived so many different lives, but I don't feel like I truly know who I necessarily am sometimes because I've done so many different things. And so it's been just really interesting, but I think that it's also really cool and unique. And I think being open about it, if I can, help one person or just find somebody else who's like, hey, like, if there is fear in it, but also like there shouldn't be fear in it either. And we got to start talking about it a bit more, especially for women, like they're just bringing out these tests because these tests weren't meant for women for a long time. And that's why women are just now getting diagnosed with these things.
Yeah. I want to make the word beautiful scary one word.
Yeah.
Because the beauty in facing what you're most scared of, it's like you can't feel that beauty of knowing yourself until you've done the hard work of unmasking, unveiling. And it sounds like that's what you're working through, is all that old conditioning of this is how I should be.
Yes, exactly.
And I did the same thing. I mean, when I found myself at the end of my second divorce, not knowing who I was, but looking at the outside, oh, I have this big, beautiful house. We have nice cars. We have all these businesses. I was creating a life based on what I thought I should have. And I was so sad. And I was so ready to start over again on my own terms. Because I thought relationships and connection were about making people like me. So that's my own manipulation tactic to others. And I would find myself just I would change. I would be a chameleon, people please.
Yep.
And then after so long, it's exhausting. And then, but you don't want to let anybody down because you're a people pleaser.
Yeah, I'm a perpetual people pleaser.
So you're burnt out. You're still people pleasing, and for me, I just lost myself, and so at 40 was when I realized that I was ready to take off all those masks, and it's taken time to sit in it and be comfortable, because it's really uncomfortable to face a town, to face people, to face yourself as because then you start feeling like, oh, I let people down.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm still working on this in therapy. I still feel like I'm gaslighting myself because I still trick myself into thinking like, well, you still have a job and you still do this and this and this. How could you possibly have all these things? And it's like, yeah, that's the masking part. That's you're high functioning and high masking, and then the high functioning, high masking, and that's what a lot of people don't realize that they're doing. And that's learning to take that off is so hard. And the people pleasing has been the hardest part. I've been joking with like two of my best friends in my inner circle about like, oh, I'm in my villain era, which is just saying no and setting like a boundary. I've never done that before.
Yeah, the saying no and then that discomfort
Yeah.
of, oh my gosh, they might be mad at me.
Yes. Oh, that's the big one.
That's so big.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that'll hit me like 2 or 3 days later, like, probably mad.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's old.
Yeah.
But yeah. For me, just recently, it's just been like, maybe it's my villain era too. So maybe I'll take that.
Yeah.
It's just being okay in my freaking weird self.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to work on too. Is like, like learning, like I said, I want to live my life that's comfortable for me instead of the other way around, because I've lived my life in such discomfort for so long. And beer making makes me happy. I was the chapter leader for the Pink Boots, which is a nonprofit for women in the beer industry, for 2 years. I ran that. I was the president of the Master Brewers for a year, and I ran them. But the whole time I ran them terribly, because I wasn't putting myself into them wholly. Because I ran them because I felt like I had to, and because I had to be the best, and because I needed to be in a leadership position, again, to prove to myself that I was worthy, to prove to others that I was worthy. And I let a lot of people down. And it's hard, because it's like that people pleasing almost becomes a way that you are people pleasing so hard that you end up just letting everybody down. And in the end, you are not people pleasing at all. You're just, now everybody actually is mad at you because you haven't done the things that you said you were going to do, because you're so overwhelmed with all of these things that you said you were going to do. And so, once my presidency was up, and now that I don't chapter lead anymore, I help behind the scenes and I give advice, and I work on the DEI committee for the Pink Boots. But I also am learning how to like accommodate myself with how I need to be accommodated with those things.
Yeah, just like you would your best friend or
Exactly.
or a pet or a kid.
Yeah, and I always used to joke like, oh, I'm a flaky person, guys. Like, watch out. Like, I'm flaky, and it wasn't that I'm flaky. It's just I don't like a lot of social interactions with big crowds and things like that. I get nervous and things like that, and people were like, "Well, you're so good at these things." Two things can be true at once. Like, I can be good at them, but I don't have to like them at the same time. And I'm learning now that like those are a lot of my, like, those are signs of my mental health and things like that. And so now I'm saying, hey, I can't physically be there, but I'll be there on the Zoom call, because for me, I can't actually be at the meetings, but I can be on the Zoom call meetings because that's more comfortable for me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just learning to like accommodate myself and what works for me instead of burning myself out. And I think advocating for myself, which is, again, if you're a people pleaser, that's incredibly hard to do. But like I said, I've got a great like crew of therapists behind me, which have been incredible. But it's been hard because like I've been with my therapist for 3 years now, and we finally just had a breakthrough in the last 2 sessions where she was like, "Oh my God, finally." She was like, "I'm finally like cracking you," because she told me, she's like, "You're so hard to read," but I really had to like open up to her about like the autism thing, which again, I feel it's hard for me to say, because I feel like a lot of people aren't going to believe me when I say it, because they look at me and they're like, well, you do all these things. And there's such like a stereotypes around it too. Same with OCD. Like when I got diagnosed with OCD, even I had stereotypes. I'm not organized. I don't wash my hands a bunch. Like that's not what these things are. And it's a spectrum. And so like just learning all of these things has been incredibly hard. And I think one of the biggest things too is like, I mourn for my younger self sometimes, like, as I'm sure, you kind of do too, like mourning for what could have been for myself, had I known these things if I was younger, and if my parents didn't think these were just like weird little quirky habits that I had, they weren't just like funny little things that I did. They actually were like, oh, these are actually like trauma responses that she's doing, or they're things that need to be looked at. So I've given myself that like mourning time, but now I'm kind of like, okay, the mourning period's over, and now it's time to move on and start living my life more authentically.
Yeah. I mean, there's a balance of making sure you're giving that younger
Mhm.
child whatever she needs,
Yeah.
and also not living in the past. But, yeah, it's just, it's overwhelming when you think about all the things you've had to go through,
Yeah.
and you didn't deserve any of it.
Yeah. And it's hard to like hear. Sometimes it's hard to hear that. It's hard to accept it. But then, you take it in and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, because from myself, I won't speak for you, but from myself, my thoughts are so deep rooted in unworthiness and scarcity, and there's another one too, but that's the seeds that grow inside of me that I have to, it's like weeding the garden.
Mhm.
you gotta take the weeds out so the flowers can grow.
Yeah.
So there's a fine balance of making sure that I'm giving myself enough attention to those old patterns and loving myself through. Again, I did the same thing. It's like, and I'm catching myself more and more with the people pleasing and my clients. Oh, I'll do that. I'll do that.
Mm.
I can do that. And then I can't.
Yeah.
Or I can, and it takes longer, and it's just like, and then I get upset, and then they get upset, and then, yeah, people pleasing isn't people pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
That's our breakthrough for today.
And you're just left with like disappointed people, and you're like,
And you're
they're really mad at
disappointed.
me. Yeah. Are they mad at me? Well, yes. No, they.
But they weren't.
Yeah.
I've always thought too, I'm on the spectrum. And if I could just run my business out of my home, and I didn't have to leave my home, I would be. I mean, that's my goal in life.
Yeah.
To be honest, like, it's just not to leave.
Well, and that's, I think, the beauty in like what I do with my job is that, like I said, Michelle and Randy have really given me the space. They've given me the creative freedom. They've allowed me to work at my own pace. And I think it's given me, and, this is kind of the first time I'm actually really talking about this out loud with anybody besides my husband and my inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that they have really given me the space to flourish and grow as a brewer, as a human. And so those accommodations have been just incredible for me because I can work at the pace that I need to. And it's like, wow, then I get things done. And now that I am on, certain medications, I'm really starting to kind of like flourish and things like that because it's like, oh, there's not this like weird mental block anymore. Like for my ADHD, that's been untreated for years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on medication now, and it's like, wow, I'm just doing things that I never could do in the past without even thinking twice about them anymore. And so it's just, yeah, like having that space and that just, it's just really a really great like gift to have people who, without knowing that they have given you something like that, have given you something.
How would you, what kind of advice would you give somebody that's in your position that that needs those accommodations to do their job to their ability? How would you broach the subject? Let's say you had to get a new job somewhere tomorrow, and you know now about yourself how you can function at your highest level.
I think being completely honest, and I think unfortunately having backup from your therapist and that like from your team behind you as well, I think is a big thing. And I know that I am very lucky in having that team behind me, and I know not everybody does have that. So I think going in and being open with your employer and saying, these are kind of some of the things that I need to work in this space to accomplish what I need to get done. I need A, B, and C. And if you give me 2 weeks and I can kind of prove it to you, or, and it's unfortunate that we have to prove that, but I think that might be something. But I don't know necessarily if I have a lot of good advice because this is kind of new to me as well. And, I've been given that grace. But I think if I was in that position and I did have to get a new job, I think taking my medical history, because I have the paperwork to back up my claims, and saying, here's what I need. Give me a couple weeks to prove to you with my accommodations what I can do for you.
So it's being your own best self-advocate.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's always been like my thing, even with, my mental roadblocks. Even as a teenager, even growing into my adulthood, I've always been my biggest self-advocate. And like, even like I've always advocated for myself, especially being in a male-dominated field. I've always pushed to get to where I'm at. And so self-advocacy is incredibly important. And I think that everybody should have that. So it is weird to say like, well, I'm a people pleaser, I'm this, but I also really self-advocate for myself.
Yeah. That's like that's how uh, you've grown.
Yeah.
That's how you've gotten from where you are. Yeah. We've developed tools.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the high functioning.
The intelligence. Yeah, we're intelligent
That I'm
women.
good at self-advocating.
Yeah. And so one of my biggest hurdles is interpersonal relationships. So I know we didn't talk about this before, but I'm just curious, how has your relationship with your husband changed as you've explored more about yourself and learned more about yourself, and now you're on medication? And how has that kind of all played out?
It's been great. My husband is one of the most supportive people ever, and he's also in therapy. He does a lot of mental health work for himself. And when we started talking about it, he really was like, wow, it makes sense. When I presented him, like, here's what they have found, he was like, this all checks out. This is, yeah, like, because we've been together for 11 years. And so he's seen me at my worst. He's seen me at my best. And so he was like, yeah, this all makes a lot of sense. And as one of, I think, the biggest tools too has been, again, TikTok. And so sometimes when it's hard for me to like express myself, what I'll do is I'll find TikTok and I'll send them to him of like, here's kind of how I'm feeling, or I can't put into words like how to express what's going on in my brain. So here is somebody else who can explain it better. And then he's like, oh, I understand it now. But he's so patient and so kind and so understanding. And I think just the communication too, we're very big. We're both children of divorce. Like, he doesn't talk to his father. And so for us, I think one of the things is we look at our relationship as like, we never want to have what our parents had. And so we make sure that we are communicative, and sometimes we like overly communicate. And so that's, I think, one of our main things is just communicating how we're feeling. And then we do like the 70-30, 40-50. It's, if I'm having a bad day, I'll communicate that to him. Like, hey, I'm having a really low day today. Or he'll text me, hey, not having a great day. And I'm like, I got you. Like, and it's like little things. Like the other day he was having a therapy appointment, and his mother just passed away last month. And it was his first therapy appointment since his mother passed away. And, so I went in and I knew he was going to want to shower afterwards. So I put his towel in the towel warmer and I set it up for him. And so it's like little things like that we kind of do for each other too, to like make sure that you're seen and you're heard. But just, I think like that's been like the biggest thing, is just communication.
And it sounds like you've created a life that allows you to be, whether you've done it intentionally or not. But
yeah, I think so too. And like, we are really each other's like safe spaces. Like, I know that, like, I think too, because whether even like without getting a diagnosis for myself, like, he's always known how I get at like parties or things like that. And he's kind of similar almost in that way too. Like, when we go out, okay, we only want to be here for 2 hours. So at the 2-hour mark, we're looking at each other like, are you ready? Are you ready? No, actually, I think I can go a little bit longer. Okay, cool. Or, hey, my social batteries actually ran out about an hour ago. We got to go now.
Yeah.
So, we're, again, like, we're very similar in that way too. Like, and I think that's how we get along so well, is we are similar in a lot of ways when it comes to like our mental health. I think mine is just a little bit more like severe in just a different regard, but like, he's seen me at some of my lowest points, and I've seen him at some of his lowest points, and we've just always been there to pick each other back up, and that's been the biggest thing. But we're always each other's biggest supporters.
Yeah. I mean, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's great, and I think that's like the biggest thing is just, I think finding somebody you can actually unmask in front of is the important thing.
Yeah.
And having somebody who is like, when somebody's like, oh, you feel like home to me. AJ is not only my home, but he is literally like my safe space. He is the one person I can be like 100% authentic in front of at all times. Like I can have a full like meltdown in front of him and he's just like, okay, like what can I do?
Yeah.
And he never judges me. He never is looking at me like, what are you doing? He's just like, what can I do to support you to get through this? And same for me with him.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I think it makes a difference and, you know, for us and being on the same page with a lot of things.
It's amazing that you guys found each other growing up how you did.
Yeah. Yeah. On a dating website too. In the middle of San Francisco.
There is something to be said about when you are meant to meet the people you're meant to meet.
Yeah.
It just happens. Doesn't matter how it happens. It just happens.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know if I have any other questions for you. I think that we haven't caught up like this in a while, and it's so funny to hear, not funny, but our journeys have been so similar in the last couple of years that I have not gone the therapy route, but I had a really bad experience with a therapist. And I don't know if I told you about that, but the one therapist that I was seeing for years, and then she was seeing my ex and I together and separately. And it got really toxic, and it got to the point where I really felt like she was on his side because he was her handyman, and like, you know, she had like raccoons in her wherever, her attic. She would call him, you know, snow plowing. Yeah. And so I haven't gotten back into therapy, but when I did do therapy, aside from that bad experience where I just feel like boundaries were crossed on so many levels that it's not even, it shouldn't have happened, but I allowed it. That's my part of it. I had a therapist where I did EMDR therapy, or like brain spotting, and she was amazing. Her name was Judy, and just the kindest, most loving human. And brain spotting EMDR therapy is not really even talk therapy. It's like you're just like reliving experiences and allowing yourself to feel them.
Yeah, I've heard about that through TikTok, actually.
So that, I have thought about calling her again, just to get back into a professional space versus YouTube.
Totally.
I'm more of a YouTube therapy.
Yeah. I mean, any way you can get it. Any way you can get it.
And meditation's been super helpful for me. Yeah. So every day is I say meditation is my medicine, because it not only connects me to my source and like that pure love that I know we all have, it also allows me to connect to my future self and my past self. So for me, it's healthy.
Absolutely.
So, and what's happening for Tumbled Rock as far as, do you have new beers coming out in the near future?
Yeah, so we are recovering from a small fireplace fire. So we're hoping to be back open by mid-December. And then we've got some new beers coming out. My brewer assistant, he just brewed his first recipe. It was a Doppelbock, and his name is Jake. And so his first beer, Jake from State Park, will be out when we reopen. And then I was just in Sweden and was inspired by their love of fika, which is like where they do like 2 to like 4 o'clock coffee and pastries and just like get together and talk. And I really took that to heart and was like, we need to bring that here to America. We need to start like stopping work and eating pastries and drinking coffee at 2 o'clock during the day. And so I got some beans from Nautical and made a nice little cinnamon coffee stout. So that'll be out when we reopen. And then all of our like favorite winter fall beers will be out. So we'll, I think, do like a grand reopening. So, but we're hoping mid-December is when.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
You know how those things go.
So the inspiration comes from your own experiences, basically.
Yeah, a lot of times I draw from like my own experience. Like I have a beer named after my grandfather. You know, I've got beers named, a lot of them are like seasons of my life, things like that. Like a lot of my, you know, I hyperfixate on things. So a lot of times when you come in and see a beer that's like a seasonal, it's typically something that I'm hyperfixated on. Like I was very into like Love Island when it was on. So we have a Soul Ties is Crazy. And so if you watched this past season of Love Island, you know the reference of Soul Ties is Crazy. And so like that was like hyperfixation at that time. We had some like Taylor Swift inspired beers when I was very like fixated on the Eras tour because I had just gone to it. You know, so, you know, it's a lot of like hyperfixation. I get a lot of inspiration from like the Devil's Lake. Michelle never hesitates to send me names that she has. Her family has sent me like lists of names that they have. Randy will sometimes, and then, you know, my family. So people do not hesitate to send me names, which is great too, because a lot of times, sometimes I don't feel inspired. So I've got like a master list that we work off of, but sometimes they come to me. Sometimes I'm like, oh my God, what do I do?
Yeah. I think it's really, that's awesome that you can actually take some of the things that you're fixated on, which maybe at one point in your life you're like, why am I like this?
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm going to celebrate this. I'm going to name this this because I can't stop thinking about it.
Yeah. And it's fun too for me because I like when other people pick up on it, because then I'm like, oh, friend. This is a friend. This is a person who gets it.
Yeah. Which I wouldn't have gotten the Love Island.
No. I think only like 2 people got it. Everyone else was like, what is that? What the heck is Soul Ties? I think,
but I like it.
Yeah, like I think the only person who got it and the whole staff was like because it's a very like Gen Z show, was like one of our like Gen Z servers was like, oh my God, yes. I'm like, yeah, I'm in with the Gen Z girls.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. Anything else you'd like to add? Is there anything, if somebody that's listening that you want to kind of connect any dots for anybody?
No, I don't think so. I think just the only thing that you had mentioned too was like with finding a therapist. I think the biggest thing for that I really like to tell people is like finding a therapist that your values align with. That's been the biggest one. Like, cause I did kind of therapist shop, and when I met my therapist, shout out Brittany Kislow. She's amazing.
Is she online or is she in person?
I see her online, but she's in Madison. I just don't have to drive down to Madison. But we made sure that like our values align. She's into a lot of the same things that I'm into, and we just vibe on like a very like good level. And, you know, she's about the same age I'm at. And so I think that's like the biggest thing is just making sure that your values align with your therapist so that you feel like you are truly in a safe space with your therapist. And that's, I think, some of the best advice I've ever gotten when it comes to therapy shopping.
Yeah. And it is really hard if you've never been in a safe place to know what that feels like.
Exactly. Because it's really hard to open up if you don't feel 100% comfortable with your therapist.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, I really struggled with that.
Oh.
I just figured that I was supposed to feel uncomfortable.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. I know. Yeah. Because when you go through your whole life, you feel uncomfortable in every situation. But yeah.
Another thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Just another word. another layer instead of, which is why I guess meditation works for me, because then I don't have to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Awesome. Well, shout out to Brittany.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming in.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.